For letter Q, I'm going to look at questions, because it's okay to have questions. It's actually good to have questions. It shows that you're thinking. I mean, ask any teacher from elementary to like high philosophy. That's why the Socratic method is teaching through questions. And like, this is how we learn things. You have to question things to understand things. And yet somehow in Christian circles, especially in a lot of Christian leaders that frustrate me, that like, it's not okay to ask questions. If you start questioning things, and especially if you ask a question they don't know the answer to, I have watched things where people turn around and start saying, oh, well, you shouldn't question God, and just have faith, just believe. And I've seen that take people who were totally engaged and, paying attention and committed, and watch them turn their back on the whole thing, because the message that comes across is, oh, apparently if I actually use my brain and have a question, they can't handle that. This is incredibly shallow, and Christianity is this, imitation thing that as soon as you start poking holes in it, the whole thing falls apart. That's the impression it gives when we can't handle questions. But God, on the other hand, can handle questions. The book of Psalms is a ton of things of people saying, God, what's going on? God, where are you? God, what happened here? God, what's wrong with my life? God, why aren't you helping me? And never does God ever show up and say, how dare you? No one ever gets like their life is cursed because they question God. These are the things that, frankly, we're given as, these are examples. This is how to pray. This is what it looks like to trust God, to think that there is a real God that you can talk to, who can hear a question and might even be able to respond. That's what that's showing. My favorite example is the prophet Habakkuk. The whole thing starts out with Habakkuk saying, God, what are you doing? More accurately, he's saying, God, why aren't you doing anything? I'm looking around, things are going to crap, and you don't seem to be doing anything. What's going on, God? And God's response is, firstly, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. And then when he does tell him, Habakkuk immediately questions with like, God, what are you thinking? How could you do something like that? And again, Habakkuk never gets reprimanded for asking those questions. My favorite thing is that the only reason we see Habakkuk as a prophet is because of that conversation and those questions. He never once comes and prophesies. He doesn't speak the word of the Lord to anybody. He speaks to God. He has this dialogue. He has these questions, and he fully expects and receives an answer and responds again with more questions. And this is an example. This is what we should be doing. And just, if you have questions, feel free to post things on Punk Rock Theologian. You can put comments, you can send me messages, whatever, and I'll do my best to answer them. I don't have all the answers, but if you have questions, I can try to help with questions. Christians need to not be afraid of questions, because God is not afraid of questions. I actually found out at my grandfather's funeral. I wish I'd known earlier so I could have talked to him about it. But back in the day, he used to, get the kids from his church together and let them ask questions. Not because he was some, all-wise scholar that knew everything, but because he knew they had questions and he wanted to try to help them out. And they would ask questions and he'd answer what he could. And if he didn't know the answer, he'd go home and study and read it and try to come back with an answer the next week or something. And it's like, this is how we should work together. This is how Christians should learn, is by asking questions, letting people ask questions, and approach them. And if you don't know the answer, question God. He knows the answer, and assume that maybe he just might actually respond. How about that? God can handle your questions. We should be free, and we should make it okay for people to ask questions.